Hello, this is Lee on PublicLee speaking, and on this video I'll be reviewing the lovely novel known as Twilight. Side note before I start, I tend to tailor my language to my source material. Danny Phantom was meant for kids, thus no swears. Atlas Shrugged has a few forceful sex scenes, so I feel free to swear. Twilight has no sex, nor profanity, at least not in the first book, but nonetheless, no one under the age of 18 should read this fucking book, so I feel free to swear how much I fucking feel the need to. So, Twilight. I was told I should read it by a friend, so I read it one night during a blizzard about 3 years ago. I read it again to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. Turns out I had, as this book was worse than I remembered by a significant margin. Twilight is a book that could be read two completely different ways, as the character of Edward could have two possible interpretations, leaving it to the sequel to determine which interpretation was the correct one. Considering there are 4 books in the series, it's pretty obvious which way Meyer took him. But I refuse to reread the other 3 for this review, so I'm only reviewing Twilight in depth, though I will bring up themes and plot points from the later books. Either way you want to read this book, however, Bella, the protagonist and narrator, is a fucking idiot. She is the very definition of a Mary Sue. As mentioned before during Atlas Shrugged, a Mary Sue is a character who is stupidly perfect for the story she's in. Bella fills the checklist to the letter. She is a character that everyone likes, and anyone who doesn't is immediately chastised for it. She's amazingly beautiful, but believes herself to be average and has exactly one flaw, which isn't really a flaw. Bella is pale in a vampire novel. Bella is supposed to be smart, but is nothing but a complete fucking idiot, but this never bites her on the ass in any permanent way. Mary Sues always have one flaw, usually clumsiness, which Bella is the embodiment of, but again, this never causes permanent harm to her or is even negatively plot relevant. And lastly, there is always something special about them, specifically something they never had to work for. Either everything comes naturally, or they're descended from something important, or there's just something about them. Bella has 2 powers, as she is immune to Edward's mind reading, more on that later, although I suggest that this is because all it can hear is and her blood smells extra yummy to him. Yep, the vampire is head over heels in love with her because of how she tastes. Not her mind, not her personality, but her blood. Think about this for a second. That's a horrible thing to base a relationship on, and would be horribly insulting if Bella had at least the IQ of a toddler, which sadly she does not have. In any story where the protagonist is loved because of what she is instead of what she does, she will have a good deal of wholly warranted angst over how everyone would act if she were normal, and how she wants to be defined by who she wants to be, not who she was born as. A Mary Sue, however, sees this as perfectly normal and expects everyone to love them. Tweens and teens should not read this book because Bella is a teenage girl in the worst way possible, and having her as a role model is the female equivalent of idolizing Draco Malfoy, Homer Simpson, or fucking Nebuchadnezzar, depending on your age. But wait, there's fucking more! She rereads Wuthering Heights for fun. I'm an English major and I've had to read this garbage and never want to again. Okay, the writing is quite good, but okay, never actually reviewing this, so here's the plot in 30 seconds. Heathcliff and Catherine are 2 young people who love each other, except Heathcliff gets abused by his older brother, and Catherine spends a month at someone else's place and abandons Heathcliff for someone who is wealthier, leaving Heathcliff to be abused, leave, and come back years later rich with a wife, then buys his child at home, has a kid who marries Catherine's kid, Catherine dies, as does Heathcliff's son, leaving Heathcliff extremely wealthy, but alone. He dies, and the last scene is the ghost of Heathcliff and Catherine together on the English moors. This is worse than Romeo and Juliet, as Catherine could have been with Heathcliff at any time, just passed him over for a better deal and he never got over it. And Bella reads this story for fun. Additionally, Bella also mentions liking Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. I have not read Sense and Sensibility, but I have read Pride and Prejudice, and while the pace is slow, I rather liked it. However, I'm sure that Bella sees herself as Elizabeth, and Edward as her own Mr. Darcy. Except Edward isn't prideful nor prejudiced, and Elizabeth is a strong, outspoken female character in a time where that really was not done. Props to Jane Austen for the book, but Bella is absolutely nothing like Elizabeth at all. Furthermore, Bella remarks upon the misogyny of Shakespeare's works, which is as close to the pot calling the kettle black as you can get without resorting to colors. I could write an entire essay on the misogyny of the Twilight series. I could write a set of essays. I could write a fucking thesis. I won't, but I could. Right. Bella also tries to be an emotional manipulator, but fails so hard that it'd be kind of funny if it wasn't so vile. Bella seems too dumb to live. She almost dies on two separate non-vampire related occasions. Once almost getting smashed by a truck skidding on ice, which really wasn't her fault. But the other is that when she's in an unfamiliar city, at night, with her friends, she goes off on her own to look at a bookstore, and when she finds it's closed, she decides to start randomly roaming the streets to look for one that's open. Gets pursued by a bunch of skeevy teenagers before being herded into an alley, cornered, and almost gang raped before Edward has to bail her out. But more on that when I get to the story. What little of it there is. Edward, on the other hand, is a character that can be read two completely different ways, leading to two different interpretations of the book itself. This is interesting because normally, to make an alternate character interpretation work, you need to ignore pieces of the book to make it fit. An example is asking if Dumbledore was an old fool who's trying to do his best for Harry by keeping in the dark about Voldemort, or was he an immoral manipulator feeding Harry information piecemeal so as to control Harry's reactions and shape him into what Dumbledore wanted him to be? What makes Edward interesting is that I checked, and there is no piece of information that excludes either possibility, and cannot be interpreted into fueling either of his two interpretations. The first interpretation, which is the one I originally came to, is the reason I liked him so much. With this interpretation, Edward is attracted to Bella due to her blood chemistry, and reacts like anyone would upon finding out that they're addicted to crack. Crack is their lab partner in biology. You can't consume crack without getting into a lot of trouble, and crack won't leave you the fuck alone. He wants to love Bella, even though part of him realizes that this is mainly due to biology and chemistry, but is really pissed off and frustrated by the fact that Bella can't realize that she's constantly in mortal peril around him because he's a vampire, even after he tells her that he's a vampire. Edward is a little controlling, but considering her near suicidal stupidity, and that it's his own self-control that keeps him from eviscerating her in the first 50 pages, it's understandable that he wants to control her so she won't push him too far, but also so that she won't die on her own. He's a bit possessive, but that can be excused by his being a vampire, and him having lived for a century with nothing that really mattered to him, and now that he has someone, he isn't going to let her go, which is understandable, not right, but understandable. Also, he constantly tries to push her away because he wants to eat her. Oh, bloody hell. He's all like, hey, I'm a vampire, and I want to kill you, and eat you, and do horrible things to your bloody remains. And she's all like, I trust you. Okay, best example of this is when they're driving to the forest for that famous, this is what I truly am, scene in the book and movie where Edward shows himself in the sunlight and then he sparkles. So, on the way in the books, but not the movie, I think, Edward goes, okay, so you told your dad that you're out here with me, right? And she says, no, I told him I was out with my girlfriends. And he goes, so, okay, but you told your friends that you're out here with me. And she says, no, I told him I was busy at home. And he goes, so, when is your dad supposed to be home? And she says, oh, he's out fishing, he won't be home for a while. And he goes, so, you could, like, disappear, and it would be a week before anyone looks for you, and no one would suspect me. And she goes, nope, I trust you. And he responds, so what reason, really, do I have not just to keep ya? He means, kill you in the woods, drain you dry, and dispose of the body. I'm not sure what she thinks keep ya means, but it sure as hell isn't dismemberment. Afterwards, she says, I trust you, and he just goes, ugh. And his comments afterwards amount to, oh god, how can you exist? The second interpretation, which is thoroughly reinforced in the later books, is that he is a possessive, controlling, manipulative, emotionally abusive asshat. From the start, Edward tells Bella, I'm dangerous, go away, which I thought was an honest warning of, I'm dangerous, go away. However, it's also a common abuser tactic to say so, and then when they hurt their victims, they can merely say, I told you I was dangerous, it was your own fault for not listening, instead of feeling in any way responsible for their actions. And he's really obsessed and controlling and possessive, and doesn't think of her as independent, but as his. But all the evidence of this could also be explained by him being 118 years old, and he doesn't really have the greatest social skills, like how some old people are really rude, only more so. It's only in the later books, which I did read some of, but refuse to reread, that he shows his true colors as an abuser, and how unhealthy their relationship is said to become, along with Meyer's heavy-handed Mormon propaganda. Those are the two main characters, and the rest of the cast is sadly not that important. Moving on to the writing, this book is 500 pages long, yet I read it in about 8 hours. I don't normally read that fast, but it's such light, vapid writing that you can't help but blaze through it. The writing, first of all, is full of purple prose. She has to describe everything in over-the-top detail, like, I felt my heart stop in my chest as his ochre eyes scorched my soul. Yes, we get it. He's looking at you, his eyes are black, and the heart thing would be interesting if it didn't happen every time he looked at you, you dumb bint, move on with the story. It just gets old really fast. Oh, looks like I'm almost out of time. I'll continue this review in part 2 of my review of Twilight. Twy harder.